Welcome to the Resonate podcast with Aideen. I'm Aideen Riada, and today's guest is a songwriter, poet, and storyteller, Randall Stephen Hall. Originally from North Belfast, Stephen writes songs, poems, and stories about Irish history, identity, and place. Since 2007, he's released 8 albums, including his latest, Wake the Blue Sleeper. Stephen's work first reached a wider audience when legendary broadcaster Jerry Anderson discovered his music and invited him on his show. And his mission is simple: to bring people together through song and storytelling while celebrating Irish history. Welcome, Stephen. Tell us a little bit about your childhood and how that has informed your work today.
My childhood, I grew up in Belfast, grew up in North Belfast, as you said, and I didn't really know what I was going to be experiencing later on in my childhood because this was pre-Troubles. I also didn't realize that I was born into one side of a cultural experience. I didn't realize that I didn't know what labels like Catholic or Protestant were. I grew up in a house where we were given a kind of freedom that was liberal in a sense, and you didn't feel totally branded by one brand. You just experienced what you were experiencing. And then when the Troubles broke out, I won't go into it in too great detail, it made me deeply curious about what the narrative was that brought me to that place when I just appeared out of my mummy's tummy in North Belfast, totally unconnected to what other people might describe as the Irish experience or the British experience. I just had my experience. And as time went on, as I experienced stuff on the streets in Belfast and watched the news and soaked up uh, observances that informed me that uh, the culture around me wasn't all up for grabs, that only part of the culture was up for grabs. And I would have learnt that later on because when the penny dropped that I was going to a state primary school, and then I was going later on to a school called Belfast Royal Academy that was um, an interesting place to attend, but it would have had predominantly Protestant pupils. Not
And,
completely.
it's worth mentioning, like, even the word royal being in there,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that comes from the British occupation of Northern Ireland. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
don't want to necessarily say that in an incendiary way, but
Boom.
I know, yeah. So, I mean, Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom,
Yeah,
and it is,
even the phrase, you know.
yes. And so when you grew up being from the Protestant religious background, you were going to that cultural,
Yeah,
the more the British schooling system.
yeah.
And because of that, Irishness had been diluted in that school system. Would
It
that be
wasn't
right?
very, yeah, it just wasn't very available. I mean, there would
Mm.
have been a time way back in the mid 1800s when schools like Inst, which was another grammar school, taught Irish, but that doesn't happen now.
Hmm.
And going to the yeah, when I look back on it, I didn't hear very much Irish mythology. We weren't doing workshops on Irish mythology. We didn't have access to the Irish language. There wasn't even a form of teaching that explained that most of the location names in Northern Ireland were anglicised Irish location names, which could still be used now to explain many, many meanings of words through that one area alone. So
There's a
a lot.
fascinating play, you probably know about this,
Oh yes,
Translations
yeah, yeah, yeah.
by Brian Friel.
Real,
And
yeah.
yes, when I left school, secondary school, I wanted to act. And my audition piece for the acting college was from Translations
All right,
by
very
Brian
good.
Friel. And so I hadn't actually heard of it, but that's a very interesting story about the men who went around and they were trying to figure out how to make a
How do you
very,
write this down?
how
Yeah.
do you write this down? Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because the word Dublin, in the capital of Ireland,
Oh
translated in
yeah,
Irish is Ballyahaclia,
yeah,
which is the town of the Dark Lake, I think, something
yeah,
like that.
yeah. Does that mean
And
you could call it Blackpool?
yeah, you could. But they already had one of those in the UK, so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
didn't. So there's interesting place names. I think that's
There's,
really an
yeah,
interesting part of the heritage. And it comes down to our roots.
yeah.
And your identity and who you are is often informed
Hmm.
by where you've come from and your roots. And it sounds to me like you wanted to go deeper. You weren't satisfied with,
Yes, ever since I was a wee boy, I've been one of my main, one of my gifts is being able to observe and being able to listen while you're not a big presence in a room, you're a child. So I've been doing that my whole life. And that was one of the ways that I was being informed. For instance, a lot of neither my mum nor my dad came from Belfast. So they were outsiders too. My
where were
mum
they
came,
from?
my mum was from Coleraine in North Antrim,
Mhm.
and my dad, his dad worked for the Northern Bank. So because of that, he was born in Milford in Donegal, and he also lived in Bray, and his sister too lived in Bray, and he even won a silver medal at the Dublin Feis playing the piano, maybe about 1941.
So he would have had
Yeah, he
normal
would.
Irish culture. He
Yeah,
was from
well, his sister was Aideen,
Aideen, same
as
as
we've
my
talked.
name.
Yeah,
Yes.
as we've talked before, and their
But
dog
being
was.
having grown up in Donegal, he would have had access to more what we would know as Irish culture from the Republic of Ireland.
Yes,
But he
yeah, yeah.
didn't bring that to you then
No,
during your
not really.
childhood.
No, he uh, his dad wanted him to go into the bank, and he wanted to become an architect, and he did it a real hard way in private practice. Eventually, became qualified by doing an exam in Edinburgh, and I hope I'm not rambling here, Aideen. And he was always musical. So that, and my mum was musical too because she sang in choirs in Coleraine. So I was being given all the stuff that I wasn't fully presently aware of. And no, he didn't give it to me. And we didn't really talk. My mum occasionally would have referred to me as being a quarter Irish at the tea table. And but my dad didn't. We didn't really get talking about his Irishness until maybe the last couple of years of his life. And he died very young. He died at 52 of
Mm.
heart issues. So he he loved different parts of Ireland. And when he came north, because his father was a bank manager in Armoy, which again is North Antrim, he was a day boarder at Coleraine Inst, and he just didn't like it.
Mm.
It wasn't his thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
coming back
yeah,
to you for a minute, why do you feel it's important for people to find a connection to their stories of the past and their culture? And
um,
why is it important for you and why would you think it would be a good idea for others?
well, I, for instance, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who watch the likes of Gabor Mate, uh, and he would be very into how trauma can shape the way that you look at things, uh, and how it can compromise your authentic self
Mm.
right from birth. So I think one of the reasons that I would suggest that people look into their roots or discover their own history, and also they should do a GCSE in this, in standing up and speaking for yourself.
So a GCSE is a qualification, a secondary level.
Yeah.
So it would be like it's not like an SAT, but it's that
Bit
age
like,
group.
yeah,
I
a bit
think,
like
yeah,
drama, you know,
yeah.
but being
You
able
you would
to,
suggest people should be able to stand up and speak about who they are.
yeah. And also don't be turned off by learning, by not using the broadest selection of words you have to hand because they are a gift.
Now,
Totally
what do you mean by
free.
that?
Okay. There'll be different sections of society who speak a particular way, and they dilute the breadth of their vocabulary. That's one thing. And they feel I shouldn't be speaking on their behalf. They feel they should be speaking like their contemporaries wherever they grow up. So wherever they grow up and whatever they experience, like you could sound like you come from Belfast in different ways, in different sounds. You know,
Hmm.
it's like a different menu. Just looking at Belfast, uh, but
And that
along
would
with,
be in terms of accent as well as the
yeah, it
wording.
would go along with accent. It would go along with using grammar in a particular way. Like we, if I went to um, Essex or somewhere down in the southeast of England, they would automatically know that I'm from Northern Ireland because of the way that I sound. Not just because of the way that I sound, but because of the way I construct the words in each sentence, because I am speaking Hiberno English, which is
Which is,
governed by Irish grammar.
yes, fascinating. So you're suggesting that people allow that creativity into even how they express themselves through how they
Yeah,
speak.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And look, tell me a bit more about, say, because the reason you're, doing podcasts and is because of you want to share your how you
Yeah.
developed your creativity and what
Yeah.
you've done. But I know that coming back to Irish culture wasn't something you did your whole life. It was after a career for a long
Well,
time in advertising,
yeah.
isn't that right?
Well, what happened was, I'll give you, just to give you an example. I left art college in 1980, and I worked for 8 years for a few ad agencies in Belfast doing graphic design, right? Although in my day there were no computers, and you started off creating artwork with paste up, right? To be realistic, and I learned a lot in those 8 years. But one of the things I felt before I went freelance was a lot of the work that I was working on wasn't very deep. It was selling meat, it was selling cars, it was selling beer, it was selling, just everyday items. It wasn't very deep. And, but it taught me an awful lot of skills that I then utilized to try and dig into the deeper stuff maybe 10 years after that, around
Mm-hmm.
coming up to 1998, when I published a wee book called The Giant's Causeway. And so I was taking on I hope I haven't jumped ahead of myself, Aideen. When I self published a book that tells the story of the Giant's Causeway. In some
Which I
sense,
love, by the way,
oh,
which is
that's good. I'm glad you
beautiful.
liked it. Glad you liked it.
And it's I think what you're saying there as well is that you found meaning. There was like there's more meaning
Oh,
when you were
yeah.
creating
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
the Irish culture
Yeah.
that was lacking when you were working in advertising.
Yeah, well, that's one aspect, but also the Giant's Causeway story is a story that encompasses the links between the northeast of Ireland and Scotland, and how it reflects an earlier period of time when you weren't looking at countries like states, like modern states. You were looking at areas of trade and influence, and how the Irish Sea was like a motorway as opposed to a blockage, and
Hmm.
how language passed from Ireland to Scotland to give it its name from the point of view of the Kingdom of Riada. things like that. So things like that really fascinated me. Oh, sorry, I've got these jingly things in the studio. And around 1985, we were in the process of having our first daughter, Natasha, and we stayed up in Donegal for the first time in a place called Lafferty's Holiday Homes. And we had the joys of staying in their family's original cottage that had a valley in the middle of the bed and all the peat you could burn, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
Natasha was Anne was pregnant with Natasha, and we walked past a road sign, and I said, "Why don't we go to Tra Beach? Why don't we go to Tra Beach?" Not knowing what Tra meant,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing that it would have a relevance to words like Cultraw in County Down, which is by the water, the
Went
corner of
close to
the
where I'm
corner
from,
of the,
Tramore.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
So the Tra means strand, I think, does it?
Big, so it just mean, so would it mean like big beach for
Yeah.
you? Big strand, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these elements are there to be found. Like I sometimes use the word singing sand, where you pick up these wee grains of information and you add them. You maybe put them in your shoe and you carry them with you and you never lose them once you've found them. But
Mm-hmm.
you have to find them and you
Well,
have
it's a
to,
richness that brings richness into your life. So, for instance, my name is Aideen, and
yeah,
the EEN at the end of my name has a meaning in Irish.
that small. It's
Small,
a small.
exactly.
So is that linked to Aidon or Aiden?
Aiden is a kind of a, yeah, but my name actually, if you go back far
It's
enough,
like
is spelled
little.
completely different with an
All right.
EADAOIN.
Yeah.
So the version that I have has that small in there, and that is nice, isn't that? It's a nice to know what your name
Oh,
means.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And then also, we know that O'Sullivan and the O'Malleys and O is used a lot in Irish names, and it means son of.
Yeah.
And I never realized that you could add ni, which would be
Yeah.
daughter of.
Yeah.
So there's a lovely richness to Irish languages, which is one of the reasons why my last name is Ni Riada, which I changed. My family go
Mhm.
by Reedy,
Yeah.
but the Gaelic for my name, for my father, would be O Riada, son of
Yeah.
Reedy, and for
Yeah.
me, Ni Riada, daughter of Reedy. And it helped me, like you,
Yeah.
I wanted to connect more deeply with my Irish culture. And that
Yeah.
was a way that I did that. And for you, it's been a lot about continuing to create and to connect others to Irish
Yes.
culture through your
Yeah.
creations.
Yeah. Yeah. You were saying about the O's there. You could
Mm-hmm.
say, "Oh, come in now. You're welcome." Uh, I just once I find information, I want to share it with other people because whether now there'll be some people they just don't care, they're not interested. But I'm on the hunt to share some of this information that I've gleaned over a long period of time. So I'm a man who's grown completely out of ignorance, a bit like a plant that's found the right soil. A plant that you go, oh, you don't have how did a Stephen Hall plant get there? That's
Mm-hmm.
totally, they normally grow over there. And
And I think you value it so much more because the lack of it was there in your life earlier.
oh, yeah. Yes, there's something a bit lacking in that guy.
Yeah. Irish culture is lacking in that guy. Would you
Yeah.
like to share a song with us?
Yes, I could be persuaded whether I'll give it a go. Um, Years and years ago, my wife and daughters bought me this Kenyan hand drum. It's not like a boron, it's two-sided, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's two sides to everything.
Except a
And
Baron.
yeah, except the Byron. Yeah, yeah,
So we'll
yeah.
with the
So
the song that you were planning to sing is called
the wee wee man, the
Wee
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 wee man.
Man.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
can maybe tell you a bit about it. after I've sung it. I am just a wee man. I drive down the roads in my wee van. Don't go fast, I go right far. My coat and hands are dirty. I don't make much, I just make enough. The buttons come off my wee coat cuff. I look pretty small, I smell pretty rough. Might be seen as scruffy. Jig, 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 I'm not awful big, I'm just knee-high to a wee fat pig. Oink at the moon and a grunt at the sun. I'm the wee man, just look at me run. I'm the wee man, just to look at me run. But I once was an elfin king, I still live out by a fairy ring. Hang my washing on a thornbush twig, dance as the moon does a wee jig. I work round the farm, I work round the house, I move like a leaf, squeak like a mouse. Sometimes bad and sometimes good, wash in the rain and sleep in the wood. Jig, 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 I'm not awful big, I'm just knee-high to a wee fat pig. Oink at the moon and a grunt at the sun. I'm the wee man, just to look at me run. I'm the wee man, just to look at me run. So if you see me out and about, don't be scared and don't even shout. Just take care, it's in my plan, for you've just seen the wee man. Jig, 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 I'm not awful big, I'm just knee-high to a wee fat pig. Oink at the moon and a grunt at the sun. I'm the wee man, just to look at me run. I'm the wee man, just to look at me run. You.
Wonderful.
So that's a wee man. And I used to, do you want me to talk a wee bit about how that wee
Yes, tell
man
us a little,
came into
tell us a
being?
wee bit about the wee
Yeah.
man.
It's based on an experience that I had when I was very young. I was about 6 years old and I was growing up in North Belfast. And I woke up one night and my brother was asleep. We shared the same bedroom. And I woke up and I could have sworn I heard talking downstairs. So I got up, all the lights were off. I walked to what we call the head of the stairs. I was looking down the stairs into the hallway of our house. And out through a closed door came a wee figure, a wee man. He was like something that had been dragged through a hedge backwards. He was maybe about 3 feet tall. He wasn't glowing brightly. He was a bit like someone had turned the dimmer switch down on him. And he had. We ended up in a kind of standoff. I was on the stairs and he was in the hall looking up at me. He wasn't talking. We were just looking at each other. All his colors were quite muted and monotone. You'd almost think he'd been created out of a thorn hedge. And he had eyes like raisins. He had a slightly bulbous nose. He had pockmarked skin, like he'd had acne when he was young, maybe when he was about 200. And because he seemed like 400 years old. He had a funny wee hat that I came across later on in the book that was used by Irish archers. It looked a bit like a fez, and all his clothes were very raggedy, and he was just dripping with character. The only way I could describe him. So um, eventually, I went back up the stairs. I did. I should have walked down the stairs and said hello, but I didn't. I was kind of shocked, and I crawled
You're
in.
only 6 years old, in
Yeah, it's
fairness.
only 6 years old. I crawled into my mum and dad's bed, and I never told them what had happened. And for years, I kind of the story would come back into my head, or the experience would come into my back into my head. And over the years since then, I would have experienced different things like unusual waking dreams and stuff like that. But that's for another time. And I then, years later, years went by, and I found out from historic monuments that the house that we lived in was on or right beside an Irish rath, which is also a ferry fort.
Wow.
Okay, so that's interesting in itself. And then time went on again, and I was coming back from a workshop with children, and I wrote the song on the road, having taken some um, water from a well, St. Aidan's well, near the coast, on the way up to Derry. So I'm very open to experiences like that. But so all the song, the experience, the archaeology, it all works together. And it's all like, I kind of look back at it and go, well, if you didn't see me as Irish, why the hell did you walk through that door and want to connect with me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that makes me feel very Irish, very rooted in the place. Rather,
Well, I
because
definitely see you as very Irish, Stephen, very Irish.
that's great. I'm very grateful.
Yes.
It's always nice to
So
connect.
yeah, it is, and my mother is American, pardon me. So I discovered a lot of my Irishness later on, and obviously I'm Catholic, so and I was brought up in the South. So I had a very different
Yeah,
experience to you.
yeah, yeah. Very different. But can I tell you a very short story?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I used to play in groups when I was a teenager, and then groups. Now these aren't like acoustic trad bands. This was like during the period of punk, and our the group that I was in uh, later on was called Six Telly. That's what people would have shouted in Belfast when they were selling newspapers. It means the sixth edition of the Belfast Telegraph. Six Telly. You'd hear people going, Six Telly, Six Telly, in the street. And so we called ourselves that. And we played in some of the punk venues. We were never really punks. We looked like an odd mixture of things. But we found it very difficult to get somewhere to practice. So we used to practice in a place called Holy Family Primary School at the top of the Limestone Road in Belfast on a Sunday. So mainly because we were like uh, an accidental cross community group. So that's where we found the best place. We also practiced, I think, at one time in a nun's house, because the bass player was Catholic, the drummer was Catholic, and the other three of us were Presbyterian in origin, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and we were very lucky. So I always look at experiences like that as being a wonderful mixture of things that enabled us to get our act together back then. Uh,
And now
by
look at you
jumping
bringing
boundaries.
out albums and everything.
Yes, yeah, it's amazing what happens.
We're going to be winding things up in a few minutes, Stephen.
That's okay.
And
That's okay.
I
I
know
can take
that
it.
you could talk for a long time,
I
and
could, yes.
I have loved getting to know you through our preparation for the podcast. And thank you so much for being on my show today.
That's great.
And
Lovely.
I
I've
know,
really enjoyed it.
I know you've got a couple of books. You've got the Giant's Causeway book. You've got another
Yes,
one.
yeah, yeah. If anyone's looking for any of this stuff, um, if you just do a word search of my full name, which is Randall Stephen Hall, that will bring up a website, a music website. It will bring up an earlier website, and some of these goods. I hate being commercial. Some of these things can be bought online.
Well,
So
I'd invite people to check those things out. The books are in the style of a children's book, so they're actually
yeah,
very colorful, and coming from the background of your graphic design and advertising, you can see, and they're humorous as well. There's layers of little jokes in
you
there,
can't do you can't do without that.
and I think that that's just so charming. I really enjoyed
It's
reading
very
your books.
it's very therapeutic.
Therapeutic for you and for others as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think people would really enjoy what you have to offer. So I encourage everyone and invite you to check out Randall Stephen Hall. And is there anything, Stephen, that you'd like to say to the listeners now before we finish up?
Um, there's such a choice of things that you could say. When I was a wee boy at primary school, early on, I was very slow to learn to read. And I would be the first one to say that I really struggled in primary school academically. Now, one of the things that really amplified that was I didn't realize that there were at least three or four other children who were so bright they would get uptight about getting 98 out of a test, you know. So in a very standard way, they were very academically intelligent. But it took me a number of years to realize, well, I've got a different kind of intelligence. That's going to work for me. It's equally intelligent, it's just different. So, from the point of view of self criticism, I'd always be the first person to get the first punch in,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. And so, because of that, I'm generally pretty grounded about the skills and the gifts that I have. But everyone has gifts, everyone has skills and ways of mediating their world and giving stuff to people. One of the things I feel most alive when I'm either doing a workshop or telling someone a story or singing them a song and I'm giving them something.
Mm-hmm.
That's and most of the stuff that I'm giving them, I have merely channeled. It's come through me, but it's not the great world famous Randall Stephen Hall doing all this stuff. In some ways, I'm a bit more like a puppet, and I'm merely being activated by the inspiration that comes from, as you know yourself, Aideen, somewhere else
Mm-hmm.
that you can then, and the more you get tied in with this inspiration, I would often describe it to children like a blue butterfly landing on your shoulder and quietly saying into your ear, I've got a wee song for you, Stephen. Listen up, pause what you're doing. And if you do, you'll get another song, you know, because I've learned in the past, if I said or thought, I don't have time for this right now, you won't get that song.
So take the opportunity.
Take the opportunity, and also for anyone who's interested in being creative in whatever way it comes, you can grow that like a plant, or you can just grow yourself, the more experiences that you have, and not to listen to the naysayers. I can remember when I was young, I would have, so, you know, when you're much more vulnerable and sensitive to voices like, you can't really sing, Stephen. That's not for you. Whereas my core and my uh, intuitive quality would have internally resonated with, I think you're wrong. I think you're talking rubbish. I think I'm going to find my own way forward and not listen to people like you. Does that make
There you go.
sense?
It
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. And I think for anyone listening, it's really important to allow yourself to explore your creativity in whatever that way that might mean to you. So it might not be drawing, it might not be
Yeah.
singing, it could be anything else.
Yeah.
And, you know, what we've been talking about today as well is it doesn't really matter what your background is. It doesn't matter who your parents necessarily
Yeah.
are or what they handed on to you. If you've
Or
an
what you look
interest,
like, or what
yeah,
you look like,
exactly.
or how you
Mm-hmm.
come across. You'll feel it. You'll feel what you need to do
Yeah.
within you.
Beautiful. And on that note, thank you everyone for listening today. Thank you from me, Aideen Riada. Thank you from Stephen, Randall Stephen Hall. And we are very grateful to have you listening. And we are interested to hear about you as well if you'd like to get in touch with either of us. Thank you so much. Bye bye.